All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. Time to do the Tao now. We're changing our thoughts and we're changing our life. And we're reading from Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao. Tuesday Tao, ladies and gentlemen, from Dr. Wayne W. Dyer. And this has been a fantastic series. I really hope you've joined me for a lot of it, if not most of it. But if you haven't and you have missed it, be sure to go back and check out some of the other episodes. It's been a fun one, and we are now up to the 69th verse. So there's a good little catalog there, or a collection, or maybe even you could call it a library. I would like my own library. It's tough, you run out of space on your bookshelves so fast, and then you run out of space for bookshelves so fast. But that's a funny way to start it, ladies and gentlemen. Today's topic or chapter that we're reading from Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, is living without enemies. Living without enemies. Now, isn't that a fascinating idea? I'm really not sure, and I never am, where Wayne is going to take these, but it always is the most enlightening, increasing our awareness. I like somebody commented last week. They commented one of the things I said. It was a great quote. It stood out to me. I was glad they kind of singled it out like that. But it was something like, if we can increase our understanding of reality, then we can increase the quality of our experience, which is what I'm always talking about. But I never really catch the things I say because I ramble so much, ladies and gentlemen. Wayne Dyer here today is talking about refusing to think of anyone as your adversary and vowing to never start a fight. That's very fascinating because Lao-tzu goes over many different areas or subjects when it comes to this spiritual philosophy of living a Tao-centered life, or living according to the Tao, or following in alignment with harmony and nature, and what some may describe as God or force. I call it the force. That's because I like Star Wars, ladies and gentlemen, but it also, it's a way to attempt to describe this life essence, this energy that is doing all things, but seemingly doing nothing at all. I mean, when you watch the grass or the trees or the flowers, it's hard to see much action, but if you look with a new perspective, you can see so much. And this is what it's all about: changing our perspective. Change your thoughts, change your life. So if you can change the way you look at things, the very things that you're looking at will begin to change before your eyes. Now, before I ramble any further, let's dive right into the 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching. It begins by saying, "There is a saying among soldiers, I dare not make the first move, but would rather play the guest. I dare not advance an inch, but would rather withdraw a foot." This is called going forward without advancing, pushing back without using weapons. There is no greater misfortune than feeling I have an enemy. For when I and enemy exist together, there is no room left for my treasure. Thus, when two opponents meet, the one without an enemy will surely triumph. When enemies are evenly matched, when armies are evenly matched, the one with compassion wins. The one with compassion wins, ladies and gentlemen. And that concludes the 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Very fascinating. I think this is the first verse going into, this talking about soldiers and the art of war. Simply put, I have the art of war back there. And as I walked by it before doing this video, I was like, wait, does that say Lao-tzu? And I was like, have I been saying the wrong name the whole time? Was I getting confused? But then I was like, no, it's Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu, ladies and gentlemen, did the art of war. This is Lao-tzu and the Tao Te Ching. Both will teach you very powerful philosophy if you can look beyond the lines. You have to be able to see between the lines, ladies and gentlemen, and see the further meaning. See, there's a great saying that says it is the space between the bars that holds the tiger, and it is the silence between the notes that makes the music. And I love both of those. It's an attempt at getting us to understand this ability to see more than just what there actually is physically in front of us. There's a deeper understanding, which comes from what we've learned from Hermes, ancient Egyptian sage and god, is that constant contemplation will lead to pure philosophy, especially in attempts and practices of spiritual striving or spiritual arriving, as we've learned, dealing with the philosophies of striving rather than, or, striving versus arriving. Striving being us always pushing to get somewhere, and arriving being us allowing ourselves to enjoy and be where we are. And both of those cannot coexist at the same time. You cannot, maybe. But the point of that is, before we dive into what Wayne has to teach us here about this 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching, living without enemies, is that if you have always practiced striving, like, oh, I have to get there before I can be happy, then when you arrive there, you will not know how to be there. And so you will continue to do what you've always known how to do and done, which is striving for more. It's this idea of when Wayne talked about it, like he went to the military and he counted off the days. And he said he was super excited on the last day. And when he left, there was no marching bands and there was no celebrations. And, there was this kind of lack of the what you've always been striving to get to. And you've never practiced actually being there and appreciating it. And so when you get there, it's very difficult to arrive or be there in the moment, be here now, and actually appreciate it where you are. See, Wayne has a funny saying. He says, if you don't appreciate where you are now, then you won't appreciate anywhere else that you go either. And I think the idea behind that is the old philosophy of wherever you go, there you will be, or you will find yourself there. And so, yeah, he tells a funny story. I'm enjoying this, so give me a moment here. We're going to dive into it. But he's like, I was walking on the beach after doing a special on PBS. It's another thing I loved about Wayne Dyer. It's probably my connection between Wayne Dyer and Bob Ross. But he was, after he did a special, it aired about a week later, and he was walking on the beach that day, and somebody came up to him and said, oh my gosh, aren't you Dr. Wayne Dyer? Says, yes, and has a conversation with him, and he asked him, he says, well, where are you from? And they go, well, the first person says, well, I'm from New York, something, it's just random. But I'm from New York, they say. And he goes, how are the people there? And they go, well, they're pretty, they're pretty mean and it's rough. And there's not a lot of nice people from the area that I'm in. And they asked Wayne, they said, well, we're thinking about moving out here, and how are the people here? He says, oh, well, they're just kind of like what you'll find from where you're from. And the other person that was before this person, which I threw off the order. See, there's a way, but anyways, the other person says the opposite. You know, we're from whatever, San Antonio or something. And they saying, you know, how are the people here? We're thinking about moving. And he says they're exactly like the people where you're from, except these people said, oh, everybody's nice. And there's this understanding of your perspective on the world and how you choose to see things will go with you wherever you go. That doesn't mean that environments don't change. Now, if you're living in a rough part of the city, it might be a good idea to find somewhere that's a bit more quiet or comfortable or safe. But with all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you got some sort of philosophy out of that, and hopefully you're getting value so far. Because we're here to try to increase our understanding of reality and in turn create the ability to increase the quality of our experience and have a higher quality of life. Not only for us, for those around us, experience more peace, joy, comfort, happiness, purpose, satisfaction, fulfillment, all of these things that can balance out the other polarity that does exist within this temporary human experience as a spiritual being, rather than the other way around. Now, let's dive right into what Dr. Wayne Dyer has to say. And once again, if you're getting value, consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, then thank you. Living without enemies. He begins by saying, quote, imagine a world with a common heritage that bonded all beings on the planet. A world that didn't know the word enemy. And I'll add, a world that didn't know the word nature, because everything just was a part of nature. So there was no separate word for that which is nature or enemy. Wayne continues, where everyone happily agreed that we're all one people, originating from the same source of non-being. Picture a world that understood that harming anyone would be analogous to harming one's self. Unfortunately, while there's never been such a state of affairs among humans during the entire written history of civilization, this is the vision of Lao-tzu in the 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching that we just read a couple minutes ago. And it's my vision, Wayne says, and I'll add my vision of the golden age of the past and the future where we are heading. And it is these visions for what is possible when we work at being Tao-centered. I'll add more aware, higher conscious people with Tao-centered leadership. This grand vision, though, which, as Jeff said on the one interview I did on his show, well, Chase, he goes, well, Chase, those are high and lofty goals. Always laugh when he said that, because if you've missed that, if you've never seen that interview, it's like the one actual podcast, radio style interview that I'd love to do many more of, but I don't know, I'm guess still building the cojones, so to speak, but check that out. It's on my channel way back probably 2 years ago or something. First live interview with Jeff, but that was a fun one, ladies and gentlemen. And it is my vision for these high and lofty goals of, bringing people peace, more happiness, more joy. All of these things that seem to be common sense, but are definitely not common practice out here in the world. And especially to focus on that kind of leadership, a Tao-centered leadership, harmonious. Remember the lessons we've done on leadership this year so far in the last few weeks. But this grand vision, Wayne continues, begins right here, right now. Remember, arriving with you and me and all of us. Remember the concept of enemy, and then remove it from your life. This could be very difficult and very challenging, but very spiritually renewing for us to be able to remove this concept of enemies from our life and model this behavior for those around us. Remember, being the change that we want to see, being the example. And so, ultimately, the ripple effect will move everyone around the globe toward an enemyless world, quote unquote. These lessons are so great, ladies and gentlemen. They're so powerful. Even for myself, as I sit here and read it to you, I'm like, wow, I wish this is important to think about and continue to contemplate. Remember, constant contemplation as we go forward in our daily lives, doing the mundane tasks of whether it be work or not work. I don't know, nothing else came to mind. I guess I've been working a lot lately. But while we're doing what it is that we do in our lives, we're attempting to implement and take on these philosophies of the wisdom of the ages, whether it be the Tao Te Ching or the great authors and poets of spiritual and psychological philosophy, or whether it be from 2,000 years ago, like Hermes and the lost wisdom of the pharaohs. But ladies and gentlemen, it is all over the place. We just have to look. And then we can begin to change our lives by changing our thoughts and our awareness. So, this enemyless world. Let's see, Wayne has a little story to tell us that might paint this picture a little better for us. Quote, recently, Wayne says, a deranged man, armed with guns and ammunition, barricaded himself in an Amish schoolhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Now, if you know this event, you'll probably be like, wow, Wayne wrote that a long time ago. But I don't know exactly what he's referencing here. He proceeded to murder several young girls. It's hard for me to say. That's just, goodness. I don't even like thinking about those things. You could tell I'm someone who does not watch the news. I'm like, oh, not watching that. That's not important for me with my limited 100% of focus capacity for life, for the experience of life that is, like, your life is made up of moments. And if you're going to spend your moments focusing on tragic, terrible things, let's learn the lesson here, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry. So there was the murder. As the peaceful, Tao-centered Christian members of this close-knit community grieved over their unspeakably horrific losses, they invited the family of the killer to mourn with them at the mass funeral and prayed for the killer as well. This is, for some, if you've never heard something like this, very odd. Very odd. As the Amish leader said, we have no enemies. We are all God's children, and forgiveness is at the very core of our faith. If we can't forgive those who are lost and would do harm to us, then our faith would be meaningless. that made me think of one of the verses. Even the least among you will do even greater things than I have done. Anyways, there is no, see, these beautiful words are so similar in feeling to what Lao-tzu wrote in the Tao Te Ching and in this verse of the Tao Te Ching, the 69th verse. Quote, there is no greater misfortune than feeling I have an enemy. And when two opponents meet, the one without an enemy will surely triumph. So how can we have an opponent without an enemy, ladies and gentlemen? How can we do this? In her illustration, that's what I was going to see. But it actually says in her illuminating book, The Tao of Inner Peace, Diane Dreher, 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 offers a response to this question. How can we have an opponent without an enemy? Ladies and gentlemen, this is deep contemplation. I wish I could come up with great titles for these videos so these kind of philosophies would reach more people. But I guess it is up to the Tao or the Force. We'll leave it up to the universe, ladies and gentlemen. And we know it will be taken care of the way that it is supposed to be. So, she says this. Keep in mind as you apply this 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching to your life, quote, the old perception of conflict as combat only narrows our vision. See, this makes me think of the dissension from the Golden Age into many thousands of years later into the Dark Ages, to where our perception, see, our awareness, our understanding of reality affected the quality of our experience. Our perception, change your thoughts, change your life, change your perception, change your life. I'll read that again here. The old perception of conflict as being combat only narrows our vision. It limits our choices. It pulls us into endless struggles between competing polarities. Holy cow. Boom, ladies and gentlemen. Boom. I have a highlighter right here. That is one of the more powerful verses or lines that I've read in a long time when it comes to understanding maybe where we lost touch with what was being described in that grand vision earlier, a time in the past where we were beyond this polarity and we knew we all came from the same source. And, you know, these high and lofty ideas. This is fascinating. There is no, doing some highlighting, sorry, greater misfortune than feeling I have an enemy. Well, I messed up, but I guess I'll just continue highlighting that one. That's a good line too. I guess yeah, that's a good teaching too. When two opponents meet, the one without an enemy will surely triumph. And that was the teaching of the Jedi. Probably comes from other things, but anger is the true enemy. If you are unable to defeat your enemy before drawing your weapon, then you have failed ultimately. You have failed ultimately. Because they are not your enemy, they are your opponent. And when you defeat the anger, you really turn most enemies into friends, which is a very fascinating story. But, ladies and gentlemen, Diane Dreher, I wish I knew how to pronounce her last name, but creates the most illuminating understanding that this old perception put a circle on perception there of conflict as combat only narrows our vision. And so this goes for everything in life. If we have a limited perception of anything as being something different than what it actually is, this is the ultimate understanding of changing your thoughts and changing your life here. If you have a perception of anything as being something different than it is, then it only narrows your vision, your possibilities, limits your choices, and pulls us into endless struggles between competing polarities of positive and negative. And we don't experience harmony and balance. You could slam the book there. Mic drop, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. We could really end the video there, but this has been a fun one, and we're not just going to end halfway through 69th verse because we've never done that. And of course, there's just a page left. So this has been fantastic, though, ladies and gentlemen. I really know that you're getting value out of this if you've joined me so far all the way. Be sure to smash the like button. It helps the algorithm hopefully get this to more people that need this information in their life. So maybe in honor of Wayne, rest in peace, Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, late illuminating and inspiring, my ultimate guide. I mean, there's many, but he's stood out as the most impactful so far on my journey of greater awareness. I could title this video, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, Living the Wisdom of the Tao, which is the title of this book. 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching. But I don't know, it's all these sensational titles that really get people to actually watch. But this might not be for the kind of people that are out there for sensationalism. But unfortunately, that's how you reach most people. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. I wish there was just like a, never mind, because that would take the art out of it. And I am a bit of an artist. She then adds, so after learning this ultimate mind-blowing understanding that the dark age perception or the old perception of things as being different than what we can actually see them as with a more enlightened, higher consciousness mind, the old perception of conflict as being combat only narrows our vision, it limits our choices, and pulls us into endless struggles between the competing polarities of positive and negative, good and bad, this team and that team, all of the things that we struggle with in our world and in our lives. She then adds, as if that wasn't enough, making enemies gives away our power, keeps us from taking responsibility for our lives. She's got powerful words. I love this lady already. What was her name? Diane Dreher, The Tao of Inner Peace. I'm going to have to get that book, ladies and gentlemen. Gonna have to get that book. She then adds, making enemies gives away our power, keeps us from taking responsibility for our lives. Instead of resolving conflict, we end up focusing our attention. Remember what I said earlier, the 100% that you have for the 24 hours of each day that you have, limited amount of your life, every moment of experience makes up the entirety of your life. She reminds us, when we focus our attention on fearing, hating, and lashing out at perceived enemies, this is what causes us the ultimate struggle. It gives away our power, keeps us from taking responsibility, and it keeps us from resolving conflict. This focus of attention on fear and hate and anger all of the descriptions of the dark side, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, I just had to say it. What's the great Yoda line? He's like, anger, no, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, and suffering leads to the dark side, ladies and gentlemen. So if we can reduce the suffering, we could possibly reduce the hate, we could possibly reduce the anger. And when we can defeat the anger, then the only question left is, where is your fear coming from? And how can we change our awareness and change our lives? Weird ramble there, but I liked it. Now, let's continue, ladies and gentlemen. Diane there gave us some fantastic words. The lesson, Wayne says and continues, from Diane's brilliant book, as well as this verse of the Tao Te Ching and the statement of the Amish community leader at that time, is that conflict doesn't have to mean combat. We can change our understanding by changing our awareness or our thoughts. So in other words, someone with a contrary point of view doesn't have to be the enemy. We could have really used that understanding for the last 6 to 10 years, ladies and gentlemen. Think of how many people that were friends before certain political things and other things happened that had disagreeing opinions and became enemies and had a falling out and no longer communicate when there was such a great relationship before. This is most unfortunate, and this is what we have been indoctrinated to behave like by society, to keep us trapped in the, I'll leave that up for you to decide. But so this idea that someone with a contrary point of view does not have to be the enemy. This is where great wisdom comes from, is open debate and discussion. Right, ladies and gentlemen? Imagine if every general, Wayne continues, took these words of the Tao Te Ching to heart and practiced them. I dare not make the first move. In a high and lofty way, Wayne says, if that was the case, then there's no way that war could possibly exist. Might be hard for us to conceive here from this perspective in reality. Wayne continues, Lao-tzu advised that if war ever does become inevitable, one should practice defense rather than offense. One should never initiate hostilities, but recognize in the heat of battle that the battle itself is something to grieve about. See, this was in a previous verse of the Tao Te Ching. With no concept of enemy, in a heart that's filled with compassion, one stays harmonized with the force, with the Tao, with God, Great Spirit, universal intelligence, ladies and gentlemen. Harmony and nature. The presence of combat, whether verbal or physical, is an indication that contact with the Tao has been lost. Our connection to the force has been lost. There should be no celebration. Every war and battleground conflict should be treated as a funeral, with compassion ruling the day. High and lofty thoughts here today, ladies and gentlemen, but these are the kind of thoughts that we need to constantly contemplate and hold dear to us and try to emulate and spread out. I think it was D. Marrow commented they hadn't heard of the 100th monkey theory. So if you're here now, D. Marrow, thank you for being here. Or if anybody else has never heard of the 100th monkey theory, You can look it up, but there was a story where there was these monkeys on an island. And the islands, there was multiple islands with these monkeys on the islands. And these islands were too far for the monkeys to swim to each other. And they were dropping potatoes. I think it was, anyway, the story will give you the location, but this is a true story. And they were dropping potatoes, I think it was sweet potatoes, to these monkeys for some reason. Guys, give them some kind of food source. And eventually one monkey discovered, because you can imagine, they drop these potatoes, they land in the sand, and the monkeys are eating sandy potatoes. But eventually one of them figures out, hey, you can go wash it off in the water, and then you have clean potatoes. And so it was this, this higher awareness and enlightenment, so to speak, of a funny, comical sense. And weirdly enough, once a certain amount of the monkeys on the first island, nobody knows exactly, they call it the 100th monkey. Once the 100th monkey figured this out and was doing it, all of a sudden, simultaneously, all the monkeys on the other islands that were not communicating physically with these monkeys on this island began doing the same thing. And that is the idea that once you reach a certain level of consciousness or thought or awareness, however you want to describe that, frequencies are involved. There's science to this, so this isn't just crazy talk. You can look it all up. But it's this idea of critical mass, which is the, it's the physical, what is it called? Physics, ladies and gentlemen. Quantum physics. Critical mass is the quantum physics way of describing when particles become unified in charge once a certain amount of them in a field reaches a certain charge. I'm no scientist, so you can see I'm struggling to find the correct words for these things, but the concept is that maybe this can happen in humanity and has happened many times before, where we reach a certain level of thought amongst enough of us that then the rest of us, it's like the tide that raises all boats, so to speak. But anyways, incredible teaching today here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into the finish here. This idea of no concept of enemy. The presence of combat, whether physical or verbal, is an indication that the Tao, in contact with the Tao, has been lost. There should be no celebration, and compassion should rule the day. As I sit here, Wayne says, contemplating the vision or the visage, what Lao-tzu actually looks like, he seems to say that a world free from foes isn't as impossible as you may believe. Remember, the old perception. As I sit here, this idea of a world free from foes, I do not think is as impossible as we have been taught to believe. And this is what Wayne says is how we can put this wisdom to work for us now in our lives and in modern times, because this wisdom comes to us from Lao-tzu from 2,500 years ago, at least this philosophy of the 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Refuse to think of anyone as your adversary. Reread the most important line of this verse. When, for some reason he has the W of when in italics there, separating it W-H-E-N. When I and enemy exist together, there is no room left for my treasure, which I think is harmonization with the Tao, or alignment with force and God, universe. Your treasure is your peace of mind, Wayne says, and your Tao connection. So your competitors in business, your opponents in athletic matches, and the members of a competing political party are not your foes. They are not your enemies, ladies and gentlemen. I know all of us probably sitting here listening to this now already know that, but hopefully one day this speech will reach somebody. Maybe even if it needs to be rewritten. You have copyright permission to take these words today here and use them to teach others of these kind of philosophies. And those people whom a government declares to be your enemies also are most assuredly not. Affirm to yourself. Here's an affirmation. Take a nice breath. I have no enemies. There are people with whom I have strong disagreements. I may even be required to defend myself and my way of life, but I will not think of them as adversaries. And then recall Lao-tzu's statement that the person without an enemy will surely triumph. Be that individual now, Wayne says. Number 2 here, vow to never start a fight. Stay on the defensive side of disputes, aligning with Lao-tzu's advice to play the guest. I'll add, rather than being on the offensive. Rather than make the first move, be on the defensive, play the guest. See colleagues where you once saw combatants by finding yourself in them. That's a deep subject. Convey compassion and caring towards your perceived adversaries, who are actually representing a part of ourselves that we should all have compassion for. Empathy, ladies and gentlemen, continuing with what Wayne says here. Refuse to start a fight, reminding yourself that if you'd be battling, you would be battling yourself. Find a way to see oneness in a holy encounter, since all of us are of the Tao. Powerful words, Dr. Wayne Dyer. And if you've gotten value, ladies and gentlemen, consider subscribing. I say that probably too many times through the video, but we're trying to reach more people. And at the end of each of these verses, which is why you should get this book for yourself to put it on your shelf, Wayne gives us a little paragraph, tiny, like 3-4 sentences, that says, do the Tao now. Here's a way that we can practically apply the wisdom of this teaching, of this verse and this little chapter into our lives today. Practically. Something you can actually do. Or attempt to do. So do the Tao now, ladies and gentlemen. Reproduce these words found in Anne Frank's diary, written as she was being hunted in World War II by the Nazis. Wow. In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. She may have seen between the lines. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right. So if you forget about what we think, if you forget about the negativity of the stories and learn the lessons, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I can feel these negative things, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right. Post this for everyone in your family to see, Wayne suggests. And that is the end of changing our thoughts and changing our life to living without enemies in the 69th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Boom, ladies and gentlemen, that's a boom to wisdom. That's a boom to knowledge. And as Diamond says, hopefully you picked up some of what we were putting down here, some of what Lao-tzu and Dr. Wayne Dyer was putting down here, as well as my ramblings. And so, fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. I don't even know what to say. Let's just leave it there because that was powerful. I think the most powerful concept, though, was that when two opponents meet, the one without an enemy will surely triumph. And this old perception of opponents as enemies is incorrect. And the old perception, the old Dark Age perception of conflict as combat only narrows our vision, and it limits our choices, our opportunities, and it pulls us into these, what we've seen for the last 2,000 years has been struggles between competing polarities. Like Wayne said earlier in the verse, the entirety of our written history. But we both believe firmly of the idea of that it is getting better, ladies and gentlemen, than it's ever been before, faster than any of us. I like the way Jeff puts it, faster than the most optimistic of us can possibly imagine. Because I'm pretty optimistic, and I think it's going to take a long time. But times are getting better, ladies and gentlemen, and you will find what you look for. So start looking for what it is that you want to find. And with that said, remember to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through greater awareness and a greater understanding of reality, a greater understanding of the wisdom of the ages, and seek out to discover the mysteries of our history. Because there is just that, ladies and gentlemen, there is a wisdom that has been almost lost, you could say, throughout time, that we need to discover and rediscover for ourselves to bring back some of the great understandings, to get rid of the dark perception that we have from the previous half of this great cycle, the great year that some call it. That's not the normal ending, that idea. All right, let's do the normal one here. Seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment. Seek to discover the hidden wisdom of the ages and the secrets. I can't do it right. The mysteries of our history, the secrets of reality, ladies and gentlemen. And remember that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So whatever we've been striving for, telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I get there, we need to begin to bring happiness to life as the activity. And then all of that becomes irrelevant because we're already there. And then hopefully the entire journey is wonderful. And so once again, thank you so much. I love and appreciate all of you. Shout out Gorilla Press, A1, D Marrow. I'm missing a few. There's a lot to think about. I'm still wondering how I'm going to title this video. It's like, dang it, man. But be sure to expand the description below and check out the link to the book itself so you can get it for yourself to put it on your shelf. And as well, a link to my Etsy shop and my landscape paintings. And even up there on the counter is a box of C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man, invented by Buckminster Fuller. It's a cool story, actually. If you've never heard that, look that up. It is powerful, so give yourself the gift of health. And until tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, continue the constant contemplation, the spiritual arriving, and continue to be the change that you want to see, be the example. And I'll see you tomorrow on Wednesday Wisdom for more of the lost wisdom of the pharaohs. We're diving into the section titled The Living Cosmos. That should be fascinating. That should be fascinating. Hermes outlines his philosophical ideas behind reality. It just keeps getting deeper, ladies and gentlemen. But if you've been here with me, thank you so much. I love and appreciate all of you. And it's been a fun time. And thank you so much for being here with me in the premiere as well. If we are here. And we are here. Just think of the time. All right. All right. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you tomorrow on Wednesday Wisdom.